Hey everybody, welcome back to Wicked Good Sports. This is the Way West stand after a prolonged layover because of the World Cup. We're finally back. Rhett, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Brian.
This should be fun. If you're interested to hear about the World Cup, well, Rhett has you covered with the Swinging at Shins podcast. He covered that with Aaron, our host of the Villa. Front to back, lots of great work over there. So check out the channel in the description down below. But we're back to talk specifically about the Premier League and even more specifically about Arsenal. Rhett, we had a long layoff.
Mhm.
How will this affect the team? This has never happened before, but what's your best guess as to how the club, who is pretty red hot, I mean, let's be real, they were tearing shit
Mhm.
up this first half of the season. How are they going to respond to a prolonged layoff?
So the club, I think, in general, is going to do really good. The
Mm,
World Cup break was not overall kind to us. Um, we lost Gabriel Jesus. We lost him for at least until February, maybe until April. It's really hard to get a bead. No one's saying an exact date. I don't know if people are afraid to, which could very well be true. And then on top of that, like you said, we were red hot. So any kind of momentum that we had is potentially gone. But like you said, we've never gone through anything like this before. The other thing is we have a lot of teams that were not necessarily performing well. The West Hams, the Wolves, the Austin Villas. Austin Villa and Wolves just got a new manager right as the World Cup break started. So that's like a nice little mini off season for them. For us, we had players who had to go. We had a lot of good players who had to go. We had some players that came back injured. But then on the flip side, Arsenal's players played 3,000 less minutes than Manchester City players did. Manchester City's not necessarily coming back with a big injury like we are, but 3,000 more minutes on those legs, it could potentially be an issue.
yeah, that's a really good point, and such like an interesting conundrum for the club to have to like navigate here, where like you said, there was a big injury, and they're not saying how long it's going to be, but how do you manage like the wear and tear? Because when you're doing like a normal season, I'm sure there's like a plan, right? Like, okay, we're going to play these players in these matches, and we have like a good feeling. The World Cup completely unpredictable. You don't know how far any player is going to go in it, and just yeah, what do you think we'll see as like an adjustment? Do you think the players who played in the World Cup will perhaps play less to start off, get a little bit of rest versus maybe some of the players who didn't get on a World Cup team who maybe have fresher legs and had like a month off to just relax and get healthy?
Well, the good news for us is, apart from the injury, most of our players did not play into the semifinals and the finals.
Mhm.
So they are getting a little bit of time off. Our biggest minute getter was Bukayo Saka.
Mhm.
He's had a little bit of rest, and Mikel Arteta had talked about before he needs to be ready to go every 3 to 4 days anyway. That's where
Mhm.
he's at in his career. So
Right.
I think we're going to be okay when it comes to being able to start off running. I don't necessarily know who's going to play and who's not. One thing
Right.
I do know is the World Cup helped because it was less games that we missed without Emil Smith Rowe. He is not going to be back on Boxing Day, but he's getting close. And it's not a
Mhm.
setback. It's just we don't want to rush him back. We don't feel like
Sure.
we need him just yet type of thing. Um, the other thing is now you have to balance. You can't just take a month off.
Mhm.
So you have all your guys that didn't go to the World Cup that you still have to find ways to train. So over the break, Arsenal took part in the Dubai Super Cup,
Very
which
fun.
was it was in 4-team invitational. AC Milan, Olympic Lyon, Liverpool, and Arsenal were
Mhm.
there. Arsenal took full points from everything. Take that for what you will. Uh, the joke going around is we've now won the Dubai Super Cup, the Emirates Cup, and the Orlando Invitational Cup. So that's your treble right there. We've already won 3 trophies this year. Uh, but from that, Odegaard looked really good. Vieira looked like he had found his feet, and those are both going to be guys. If Bukayo Saka has to miss time, those are both going to be guys that potentially step up. I mean, Odegaard's a captain; he's going to be playing no matter what.
Mhm.
We lost Reece Nelson to an injury in a Juventus friendly, and that's no good. Nobody wants that. Reece had just kind of broken back into the team after being on the fringes for a very long time. Um, and then the other way we're going to handle it is January opens up the transfer window. So we could be
Yeah.
looking at players.
So who, I guess, pie in the sky, of course, who would you like to see Arsenal, get? And then who's more realistic, because they're always like when you go into free agency with any sports, it's like wouldn't be crazy to get the top free agent, but then, you got to lower your expectations to reality sometimes.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up free agency because usually that's not ever what happens
Yeah.
in European soccer, but in a way it kind of is. Yuri Tielemans is coming up on the last 6 months of his contract with Leicester City. We had talked with Leicester City before about maybe getting him, and it didn't kind of get done. They wanted more money than we were willing to spend at the time. Excuse me. Once you're inside 6 months, you can then agree to a pre-contract with another team. So we may be looking to get Yuri now for cheap because Leicester may be saying, well, we want to get something for him. Or they may not be willing to let him go at all. And again, Leicester, while they were doing much better right before the World Cup break, they spent a lot of time in last place. And they do not want to get relegated. So they may not be willing to part with him. It may be worth more to them to stay in the Premier League and lose him on a free than get something for him. So you talk about pie in the sky. Pie in the sky would be now. I want him now and I want him cheap. More realistic, maybe we sign him for later. The other thing that's going on that may be even more realistic is Adrien Rabiot of Juventus and France. He just put a lot of minutes on his legs because France made all the way to the finals. But he had a very good World Cup. He's playing for Juventus. Juventus is in shambles right now. Their entire board just resigned. They need money desperately. There's been a lot of shady crap going on over in the Piedmont area. He's another guy that is 6 months away from being done with his contract. Do we sign him on a free? Do we get him for cheap now because they absolutely need the money? I don't know. Both of them kind of fill the same area of the field. They're both that central midfielder. We're looking for party coverage. We're looking for Xhaka coverage. When we need to fill in there, that's where we have the biggest problem. That's our biggest hole. If we lose a center back, Ben White goes into his center back position and Tomiyasu goes to right back, and we're okay. Like, it's not as good as it is when we have our healthy starting lineup, but we're okay. We have attacking options. Gabriel Jesus is going to be an issue, but Eddie Nketiah is going to be able to step up to a point. Central midfield, we lose one of those two guys. I'm not very comfortable, so that's why you're seeing a lot of push on that. And then the other guy that everyone's saying, oh my God, talk about him already, is Mikhail Mudryk from Shakhtar Donetsk. He wants to come to the Premier League. That has been known for a while. Everton was talking to him. Bournemouth was talking to him. Brentford liked him. I don't know if they actually talked to him. Reports are now, and this is reports coming from like Fabrizio Romano and David Ornstein, is we have agreed to personal terms with the player. And all we have to do is agree to a transfer fee with Shakhtar Donetsk. Their president is on record as saying that A, we're showing interest, and B, it would be 100 million euros, which no one is going to pay that. And now you're running into the same issue of if he does not want to be there anymore and you let him go on a free, now you get nothing for him. And a team like Arsenal could very well be willing to pay 50 or 60 million for him right now. It's not 100, but it's still something. And then the last, I don't even know if this is that worth talking about, but somehow in the past 3 days, we have become linked with McAllister of Argentina. I think it's because he kind of fits the same role that Mudryk would, and he just obviously won a World Cup, so you got that World Cup tax. But between the World Cup tax and he plays for Brighton, so now you're going to have the Premier League tax. You're going to have to pay more to go from a Premier League rival to your team. I think Mudryk is definitely the much more likely guy.
Yeah, I would imagine now is the time to make your money if you're coming off a World Cup victory. So we'll keep an eye on that. Anything else that you wanted to cover that we haven't yet?
So Gary Jacobs of the Times, for whatever this is worth, he
Okay.
is. We talk about tiers.
Hmm.
He is labeled tier 3. Tier 1 is like from the source, like Arsenal.com said this,
Yeah.
and so on. He's tier 3. He's saying that we plan on spending big.
Okay.
I don't necessarily know about that. There's a lot of ways that you read in this, and of course, I don't know what's going on in Edu Gasper's head. I don't know what's going on in Mikel Arteta's head, but Mick Arteta just did a interview with Jamie Carragher on Monday Night Football,
Mhm.
and he was talking about when he was getting signed on. He said he had a 5-phase plan, and that was part of the reason what sold the board on him was these are what we need to do in this order to get from where we are to where we want to be.
Mhm.
And Jamie asked him, how are we? How are you doing? He's like, oh no, we're ahead of schedule, which obviously I think is true. No one thought we would be 5 points clear at Christmas.
Right.
So now, from an Arsenal perspective, do you say, look at how well we're already doing, let's go chase this thing, we can do it now? Or do you say, our plan's working, it's working better than we thought it was, let's stick to the plan, because we're not trying to win the Premier League in 2022-23, and that's it. We're trying to win the Premier League every single year. We want to be that
Right.
team that's always there.
Right.
So if we're panic buying guys now, because everyone's saying we have to get a striker, we have to get a striker. If we can find the right striker, great.
Mhm.
But if we're going to panic buy guys now, that's not fitting with what we want to do.
Mhm.
On the same token, it's got to be tough to say we are this close to really being able to make a run at this thing. And all we need to do is go spend $50 million for a striker. And winning the Premier League and getting the Champions League nets you a ton of money.
Right.
So who knows?
Mhm.
Who knows what's going on? If we spend a ton of money, I'm not surprised. If we don't spend anything, I'm not surprised.
Mhm.
Actually, I'd be surprised if we don't spend anything. But I'm kind of expecting 1 to 2 transfers, probably one big one that we talked about, and then one that's completely off board that's we didn't see, and maybe they work out, maybe they don't.
Right.
Apart from that, looking ahead,
Yeah.
we play West Ham on Boxing Day. That is December 26th for all of us
Mhm.
Americans who aren't used to Boxing Day matches.
Yep.
There's always Boxing Day matches. It's like the NBA is always on Christmas. Premier League
Mhm.
always plays on Boxing Day. It's just the way it is.
Like it.
West Ham's going to be interesting. They were really struggling.
Mhm.
But again, 6 weeks, turn the team around. They should be a better team. They might be all right. Then after that, on New Year's Eve, we have Brighton at Brighton. Again, one of those games can go either way. Is McAllister going to be back? How healthy are we looking? And then the game that I'm most worried about, I would say, is on the 3rd of January. So, I mean, we're talking like game.
Yeah.
On the 3rd of January, we have Newcastle.
Yes.
And Newcastle was playing out of their minds before the break.
Mhm.
That's going to be a very difficult game. If we take 9 points from these 3 games, you got to think we're going to spend a ton of money and go for it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we're going to learn a lot about management and a lot about this team in the next 2 to 4 weeks.
All right. Well, I'm excited. I mean, they've done a good job, the sporting world, of giving us much entertainment throughout the holiday. I feel like so, between the NFL, NBA, and the Premier League, we're going to be all set.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
There's a
And
lot
the
going
NHL,
on.
of course. So yeah, Rhett, where can we find you online?
All right. You can find me on Wicked Good Sports on this show. And you can also find me at Swinging at Shins, which is a podcast that I do with Aaron over on our channel. We're under the Wicked Good Sports umbrella.
Yes.
Like Brian said, we covered all the World Cup, but also we are trying to be more Premier League oriented.
Mhm.
So we just did our Return to the Premier League podcast that went up yesterday, the 22nd. So that is up, that is live. It's on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Audible, YouTube, all those wonderful things.
Yep.
So
Yeah, so the idea with that, of course, we get a little bit of like a bite size just about Arsenal, just about Aston Villa on the other show. They're going to be covering everything, top to bottom, Premier League. So if you're a fan of this show, you're going to be a fan of that show. I would assume, unless you're just like, I don't want to hear about any other team. I only care about Arsenal, which would be, I guess, your prerogative. But definitely go check them out. Pretty much like every social media too, like Instagram, TikTok, it's all there. So Swinging at
Yep.
Shins, great podcast, highly recommend it. And you know, I'm biased, of course, but you know, I highly recommend it. Other than that, Rhett, thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thank you, Brad.
We'll see you all in the next one.